Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just so you know, this is going to be broadcast live on CCG TV and replayed. The microphones are all on. You can hit the black button on the right to speak, and then hit the black button on the right to turn it off. You'll see your microphone will light up red when it's on. So if you want to just turn them on and then turn them off, so you can see that they'll all microphones will come on when you hit the button, and then when you're done speaking, you can turn them off. And Judge, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll turn it over to you. By the way, for those of you who do not know me, I'm Pam Hodge, Deputy City Manager. I'm not Rick Jones, Director of Planning. He has had a family emergency, so he will not be here today, but we are prepared to move forward and provide the commission the information that was requested at the last meeting, and we are here to provide any services to you that you need. Restrooms are in the back. There are some drinks and crackers. If you need to get something, you're welcome to go in the back room. And Judge, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. My name is Mark.
You want to turn your mic on, sir? To the black button to the right. On the right side, right in front of the microphone. Yes, sir. That's it.
Okay.
It's on.
Well,
okay.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming. I want to thank everyone personally for being here. This is one of the most important, I believe our democracy is very important, and this is one of the most important things we all can be doing. By way of, I think it would be helpful, I know we all introduced ourselves the last time we were here, but I think it would be helpful again to go around the room for the commission members to introduce themselves, and then we can move on with the meeting. So again, my name is Mark Dantonio. I'm the Muskogee County Probate Court Judge. I've been a resident of Muskogee County since 1991.
Katie Bishop with Yala Public Relations, happy to serve.
Ed Rolden, Board of Elections, retired military, been a Columbus, Fort Benning over 20 years. Thank you.
Ricky Boren, retired Columbus Police Department.
I'm Mary Sue Pollies, retired educator and used to be on the school board.
Dominic Perkins, I'm a political consultant and an educator.
Wayne Hales, publisher of the Courier-Echo-Latino newspaper.
Byron Hickey, retired Columbus Police Department.
Gloria Strode, I was your 2010 Census Liaison and your 2020 Census Liaison for the Atlanta Regional Census Center.
Barbara Chambers, United States Navy retired, lifelong resident of Columbus, Georgia.
U.D. Roberts, I'm a native of Columbus, Georgia, and with Brentwood Christian Press, I'm the publisher.
Jerome Williams, been here in Columbus since 2001, military vet, member of NAACP.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you all again. I sent out an agenda last night, but I don't see if anyone has any hard copies. But at this time, if I recall the agenda, I would like to call on Mr. Williams for an invocation.
Father and Creator, we come to you right now with bowed heads and humble hearts. Thank you for life. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to meet today, Father. Father in heaven, we want to take in and lift up a special prayer for Brother Rick Jones, for his family, for the ordeal that he's going through. Lift up, give him comfort and spirit. Father in heaven, now bless this commission as we tend to the business at hand. Guide our minds and our tongues as we do what you asked for us to do. These blessings we pray in your name's sake. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. As I said, I don't have our agenda in front of us. Unfortunately. At this time, I think what I had on the agenda was a brief discussion of of what should be our guiding principles. And I think I just wanted to lay that out to you all, that each commission should have guiding principles in determining districting. And it'll be probably more helpful for those to understand those guiding principles after we've had after we've had an opportunity to review the PowerPoint presentation Ms. Hodge is going to put on.
Mr. Chair, the next thing on your agenda was
for
the minutes.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for, as I said, I didn't have the minutes in front of me. But I did want to talk about, as I said, think about those guiding principles. At this moment, I do think it makes sense for us to review and approve the minutes. I distributed the minutes last night. I don't know if they are also attached in the paperwork that was given out today. Did everyone have let me give you all an opportunity to look at it.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
I second it.
Discussion? One thing I did notice in the minutes was I don't think they reflect who seconded any motions. And I don't know if that's an issue that we should be concerned about or not, if my memory's not going to be that good. Anything else in terms of discussion? And who, actually, that's another good question. I assume minutes are being taken again today. Thank you. Hearing no discussion, is there anyone opposed to adopting the minutes as they were distributed? Okay, moving on. I wanted to take a moment to explain why we had to cancel the meeting last week and why we moved the venue to the meeting today. Last week, and I guess this is my fault, I think I was expecting I was over-ambitious on how much time it would take to process the maps and to put it all into the computer programs and all of those things, and it became clear that they weren't perfect by last week, and it's better to be accurate than quick. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to be mindful of. As to why we moved the meeting to the council chambers, is this avails us of an opportunity to record and broadcast the meetings. And again, I think public input and open disclosure is very, very important, and so I apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused you, but I think it's important that we do this right. As I was starting to talk about prior to having a copy of my own agenda, I think it's important as we review the PowerPoint presentation that we think about what should be the Commission's guiding principles in light of local, state, and federal law. I don't know, Ms. Boren or Ms. Sheftal, do you have anything to add to that at this moment, or do we just want to keep moving on?
I think when we get to the legal guidance in the PowerPoint presentation, it'll be the time to make it.
If you're going to discuss the guiding principles at a later time, then I would be happy to comment.
I did want to put it in everyone's mind while we go forward with the presentation. At this point, I guess I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Hodge.
turn my microphone on. I will go through a portion of the presentation. I'll turn it over to Assistant City Attorney Lucy Sheftall, as well as Nancy Boren, Director of Elections, for a portion of the presentation, and then I'll walk through the maps with you. And these are just for discussion purposes, and we can come back to you with any additional scenarios that you would like to see. So just make sure you understand these are for discussion purposes only. So some of this information was provided to you at the last meeting. Since this is being televised live, we thought it would be a good idea to go through this setup and purpose of the commission. So again, this is part of Charter Section 6-102, requires that the commission, and whether it's a districting commission or a redistricting commission, in the charter it does talk about a districting commission, formulation of 17 members. There's 6 months after the federal population census is released that you have the opportunity to do your work, and you are to recommend a plan of reapportionment for council districts. The census was released on August the 26th, and so for that 6-month period is February the 26th. The report must contain the district boundaries. It shall also be based on center lines of streets and other well-defined boundaries, a reasonable effort to have the same amount of population in each district, as well as a map of the proposed districts. The report shall be filed with the Clerk of Council's office, and it will be treated as an ordinance for City Council. Upon receipt of the report, Council must follow its procedures for adopting a proposed ordinance, which includes the publication of the map and the descriptions. It would also be a first and a second reading. So first reading is a public meeting for public comment, and then the second reading is when Council would vote on the ordinance, and it would enact a redistricting ordinance within 6 months. It does not apply to any election once the ordinance is approved within 6 months of adoption. And so I will go through that timetable just for the commission's information in order to meet the timeline for the May 24th election, what would need to take place. So there's kind of a couple different timelines and requirements that the commission just needs to be aware of. And at this time, for the other legal requirements, I'll let Lucy Sheftall walk through those as the Assistant City Attorney, and Nancy Boren can comment on those as well, and then I'll finish up with the rest of the presentation. You want to stay there, Lucy? Okay.
Everyone can hear me all right? Just didn't light up. Pam, basically, we're under 3 sets of legal requirements for the districting. The charter requirements that Pam has just been through. And one point I do want to make on the charter requirements is that this commission is tasked with designing city council districts. Now, we are hoping that we can also use the same districts for the school board, and Attorney Greg Ellington is here to help us work on that. But I just wanted to be clear what this commission's responsibility is. The state has actually imposed a new set of requirements with Senate Bill 177 in 2019, and that requires the local council districts to be submitted to the state's Office of Legislative and Congressional Reapportionment before the governing authority can adopt the new district ordinance. They're basically doing a technical review. And once a certification is received from them, and Pam will talk a little more about the timeline on that, it can come back and be actually adopted by council. And their review process can go on during the period between the first and second reading of the council ordinance. Another addition that Senate Bill 177 has made is that we are also, after your work is done, after the council's work is done, there will actually also be a local act of the General Assembly that adopts the districts. So those are sort of the new hoops to jump through. However, sort of on the other side, there is no longer the requirement that the districts be submitted to the Department of Justice for pre-clearance. However, we are still under the Voting Rights Act and have to take into account principles of equity, constitutional rights, one man, one vote, not diluting voters' influence, and other guiding principles of federal law.
Sure. I'm looking at the other factors to consider, and it says cannot dilute the minority population strength through newly reconstructed districts. How do you define dilute?
Well, basically, you would have to refer to case law and look at situations, what was too much, what wasn't. So there's no clear, absolute guidance on that I'm aware of.
Any other questions of Ms. Sheftel? Ms. Hodge?
Okay. So this, again, is just a timeline for your information. If the commission's work is to be completed in line with the May 24th, 2022 election, it is a very tight timeline. We just want to make sure that you're aware of what that timeline would be. And if that's the intention of the commission, this would be the timeline that would need to be followed in order to meet the redistricting and the new districts to apply to the May 24th, 2022 election. Again, it's a very quick timeline. It would require additional commission meetings if no decision is made today, and public meetings next week, probably Monday or Wednesday. Tuesday is an election day, and so Monday or Wednesday, this council chambers is available for those meetings. The redistricting commission would have to submit their approved plan to the city council on November the 5th, which is next Friday, in order for us to have that plan submitted to the state reapportionment office that Ms. Sheftel just mentioned, because they require a minimum of a 5-day review in order for the first and the second reading to take place within that 6-month requirement that's in the charter. So I just wanted to make sure that the commission's aware of that timeline, if that's something that is the intention of the commission to have these districts in place for the May 24th, 2022 election. So I'll go through the census data. You heard some of this information, and then we'll go into the maps. The census population was 206,922. When you subtract out Fort Benton is 199,814, and so that's the number that the commission is working with. This is the demographic information for the 199,814 from 2010. That information was 182,004, and that was split. Black at that time was 46.83%. White was 43.12%. So there has been a shift in the demographics as well from 2010 until 2020. So again, there are 8 districts, the 199,814 divided by 8. The magic number is 24,977. That is the ideal population per council district. And again, if the school district uses the same boundaries, that would be the ideal number for the school district as well. But obviously, we cannot get each district to be exactly what that ideal number is. So there is a variance allowed of 1% either way. So that's about 250 plus or minus would be acceptable. So the population range is from 24,727 to 25,227. We did look at 3 scenarios, which I think was outlined to you at the last meeting, so that's what these maps represent. But again, it's for discussion purposes, and if there's other scenarios that you want us to look at, obviously we're happy to do that and bring that back to the commission. Scenario 1 just basically takes the population from east to west and divides it into 8 districts. Scenario 2 is a more targeted approach, and it does meet the requirements, but it does not take into account existing incumbents to make sure that they remain in their district. And so scenario C is a hybrid of that, which is where we went in to make sure that the incumbents remained in their district. And we'll walk through that as well. So again, this is the map. So the black line on this map, and you do have a larger, and up at the top it'll say scenario A. So the black lines are the existing district, and the colored districts is how it just moved from east to west and put them in districts. So you can see that that doesn't follow our existing district map at all. So scenario B, oh, and let me back up. So we also have identified the addresses of both the council members and the school district members. So also to point out on this particular map, the council district and the school district members for District 6, District 8, District 5, District 1 are not still in their district. So scenario B took a more targeted approach, but again, based on this approach, there were incumbents that were not in their district, so you'll see this as labeled as scenario B. You can see that District 2 would not remain in their district, the incumbents. The council member for District 8 would not. The school board member for District 5 would not. I think those were the ones who were outside their district. So the approach that we took through the software was what could be done to realign the district so the incumbents stayed within their district, and also to not divide a subdivision where there would be one counselor for the front part of the subdivision and a different counselor for the back part of the subdivision. So that was one of the things that we looked at as well when we went into scenario B, or scenario C. So I'll spend a little more time. This scenario is the one that we provided district-specific maps for. And so again, this is just for discussion purposes, and we will take any request from the commission to provide additional maps, look at it a different way. We spent a lot of time adding this census tract and taking this one out in order to make the puzzle fit together and to meet the requirements of the population. So again, we're happy to provide any additional scenarios the commission would like to see. So what I have provided to you in the PowerPoint presentation to go along with each map is a comparison of what the existing district lines, what the census data showed from a population standpoint as well as a percentage standpoint. Also looking at what the existing district showed based on the 2020 census, both population and demographic information and percentage. And then we also looked at scenario C and what that population and percentage looked like. So this is District 1. Again, we have indicated where the council member and the school board member resides to show that inside the red color, they would still remain in their district. And so the outline in black is the existing, and the scenario C would be the colored portion of the map. And then again, this is the information to provide the demographic information to see how it was in 2010 in the current district, how the census data in 2020 in that current district, and how the census data would be in the scenario C district. So for example, in 2010, in that district was 14,399 Black, which represented 62.77% of the population of the total of the 22,939. In 2020, without moving the boundaries at all, that Black population went up to 15,203 citizens and represented 64.85%. With the change in the boundaries represented in scenario C, would go to 14,936, which represents 59.29%. So I know this is a lot of data on one piece of paper, but felt that this was something the commission was asking for at the last meeting and wanted to make sure that we provided that to you. You can see the total for District 1 under scenario C is 25,190, which is within that variance that's allowed through the law. And this was also the maps that were sent to you. I sent them, I think, late Tuesday night. There was an interactive map where you could turn scenarios on and off so that you could see the difference in the changes. Again, this is, and what we saw was the population growth in District 2 and District 6. So it required the boundaries of District 2 and 6 to become smaller in order to meet that population requirement, and the other districts had to grow. But because it's kind of a domino effect, when you shrink District 2 and 6, trying to make sure that the incumbents resided in their district, it was some, movement in order to get all of the districts to be within that variance, and also make sure that the incumbents were in their area and that we didn't subdivide a subdivision or an apartment complex. So that was kind of the basis for how these maps were put together. So again, this is District 2, and there was population growth in District 2. And if you look at the next slide, the population growth in District 2 based on the existing boundaries went from 22,794 to 27,676, which again was higher than the target ideal population number. So there was a portion of that district that was removed in order to meet that target, down to 25,215. District 3, and you'll see at the bottom of this map, this is 185 and Victory Drive, that portion to the right-hand side to the east, was part of Fort Benning in the 2010 census. So that's why you see it in green here, but kind of outside the boundaries. When you look at the 2010 census, that was considered part of Fort Benning. This is a Fort Benning Technology Park. There was 32 people in the census, so there's no homes down there, so I'm not sure where those 32 people reside in that area, but it is now part of Muskogee County, and so it would be part of District 3. And again, this is the census data, 22,737 in 2010, 24,996 in 2020. And so that district was within the variance. There was a little bit of adjustment just because of that domino effect, having to move around and keeping incumbents in their district at 24,868. District 4, and part of what is included in District 4 that was District 6 before on the right-hand side was Muskogee Technology Park. There are no residents per se in Muskogee Technology Park, which was part of District 6 before, but in order to get that portion up off of, I believe that's Macon Road, that top section, it has to be contiguous, so we pulled Muskogee Technology Park into District 4, but there was no census impact or citizen impact in that particular scenario. So for District 4, in 2010 was 22,932. In 2020 was 25,642, so slightly over the target And so the scenario would bring them to 24,944. District 5, of course, this is one of the districts that's kind of in the center of Muskogee County, and so that was one of the districts that saw some more shifts than some of the other districts just because of that domino effect that takes place. But again, trying to maintain the incumbent, and a lot of the incumbents live on the edge of their district, so it made that kind of puzzle game a little more difficult, and this was one of those districts. So the population went from 22,474 in 2010 to 23,642, so needed additional population to meet that target. So the proposed scenario C is at 24,858. District 6, again, we saw some population growth in District 6, and so some had to be pulled in District 6 in order to meet the targets in the other districts. And what you see on that bottom kind of right-hand side, that's part of Muskogee Technology Park that I mentioned, went to District 4 in order to get some of the population pieces off of District 6. Again, from 22,745 in 2010, the population in 2020 was 28,372, so above the target, and so scenario C is at 25,190. District 7, not a lot of changes in District 7 other than the shift that was required in order to get some of the other districts in line. So just brought in a portion of District 7 and moved out a portion on the north end, just close to the river, into District 5. Again, at 22,742, that population went down to 20,798. So we added a population to that district at 24,737. And then last would be District 8. It did grow. There was one section that was moved to another district up on the northeast side of District 8. That population was at 24,741, really close at 24,280, and ended at 24,812 in scenario C. Again, this is the contact information for the offices within the city, Nancy Boren, as well as the Rick Jones and Will Johnson, and the attorneys that are represented both from the city and the school district are listed here. We did have a family emergency in the planning department, not just with Director Jones, but also with another staff member in our GIS, and just want to publicly thank Trey Wilkerson and Scott Evans, who jumped in to work really hard to get all of these maps created for the commission today. So I just want to thank them for their work on this. And with that, I'll be happy to answer questions, or if you want to look at a particular map in more detail, we can pull those up on the screen, zoom in, zoom out, add census tracts, take census tracts away, so you can see how that impacts the numbers and the target, when we're happy to do whatever the commission would like for us to do.
Can you explain to me again why you take the numbers out of the Fort Benning numbers from the population before they do that? I think that question came up last time, but just for clarification.
Ms. Sheffield, you want to answer that?
Yes, Fort Benning, people resident on Fort Benning do not have a local council district or get to vote in any local elections. As an accommodation, they can vote in national and state elections in the district next to them, but they do not need to be taken into consideration for purposes of the population. And that has been the longstanding practice since Clifton Fay issued a memo in 2001 on that legal question.
So, okay, so you're saying they do not vote in our election? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct,
Those
Nancy.
7,000 folks do not vote, cannot vote in our election?
In the local level.
They vote in the federal and state offices, but not in council and school board. So they vote for congressional district, state rep, and state house and state senate, but not for school or council.
You might want to explain how that accomplished.
So there's a district combination. We know the streets that are in Fort Benning. We assign that district combination to that voter that physically lives on Fort Benning, but in the Muskogee portion of Fort Benning. It's the same in Chattahoochee County, because Chattahoochee and Muskogee both share Fort Benning.
One other point, I think we're using census data that is just the number of individuals, but which is not the number of voters. And I think there was a little bit of confusion about that last time.
That is correct.
I have a question. I appreciate the GIS department. I went online yesterday and looked at it. We didn't have a whole lot of time to look at it, but I really appreciate the fine job they've done. So sort of what I had summarized, maybe you can confirm this. Scenario A, districts 1, 2, and 8 incumbents are out of the district, right?
And we'll pull in the map up so the public can see exactly what you're talking about. So can you enlarge it?
Is
No,
that
just
correct?
the whole map. Just, yeah. So yes, sir. So District 2 would be out of their district.
8 and 1?
And 1.
Okay, so it protected 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
3 is out too.
And under the scenario A, is that correct?
So 6 is protected, 7, and this is just council district, not
Right,
school
just
board.
council.
So 6 is protected, 7, 8, 8 and 4. Can you zoom in on 3? I can't tell if 3 is protected or not.
3 is not.
Not protected.
3 is not protected, okay.
No, sir.
And, okay, that's scenario A. And now, scenario B, I'm just trying to confirm that what I looked at was correct.
Yes, sir.
Scenario B, 2, let's see. The only districts protected there were 1, 4, 6, and 7, because District 2 would have been in 8. And
Yes.
District 8 would have been in 3, and District 5 is in 8. So you'd have 2 incumbents, you'd have 2 races where they would be competing with each other, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
God, it's really good to be able to look at that. And so scenario C, all incumbents are in their district.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All include school board and council in districts, for scenario C.
Yes, ma'am.
Could I say a word about I don't know if this is in order. Well, when it comes to like protecting incumbents, I don't have, and probably nobody here has, a particular political interest in protecting an incumbent. But on the other hand, when maps are drawn that exclude the incumbents where they now live, then it does look like political considerations were given to drawing someone out of their district. And if my historical memory is correct, that's why at one time the council and school board lines were different. One of the school board incumbents was about to be drawn out of her district. And I remember having a discussion around the board table saying, if incumbents are not returned, then the voters should decide that, not some bureaucrats at City Hall. And so it does look like political considerations, even though it's not, political consideration. So I just wanted to put that out on the table as kind of a governing principle as far as I'm concerned. I think it's better if voters vote out incumbents, not line drawers.
And Mr. Ellington, do you want to comment on how that would affect school board as opposed to our council? If you can make the mic work.
Hello? Okay. So, Ms. Polly's, I think that the state legislature has actually set it as a priority of theirs, that the redistricting efforts don't draw out current sitting elected officials from their districts, I'm sure for the very reason that you articulated. That is, it seems politically motivated. So there's the appearance, and then there's also the fact that the state legislature that ultimately has to approve this plan has set that as a priority to keep people in their districts. The only other thing I was going to share with you, and it's been mentioned a couple times today and at the previous meeting 2 weeks ago, which is that the school districts joining in sharing these boundary lines is a consideration that's voluntary for them. It has, I think people would agree, worked well in the past, and so we're, here looking at this body's deliberative process to see if the course that you are heading in to make a recommendation to City Council would also make sense for the school board, but that is a voluntary process. So, and we do have a little bit of a different consideration from the school board standpoint, and that is your local charter says that if you redraw a line in the middle of somebody's term and they're suddenly not residing in the district from which they were elected, they nevertheless get to stay in office. That's not true for the enabling legislation that created and governs the school district. That is, if you redraw a boundary and a person who is elected from District 2, for example, no longer resides in District 2, then under our enabling legislation, that seat is deemed vacant at that point. So it's a twist on the considerations that you're looking at.
If I could jump in, to me, one of the things that I've been thinking about since I took a look at these maps in our first meeting is that if the state is giving us a directive to leave the incumbents where they are, why are we looking at options where we're about to potentially displace incumbents? I mean, my thought would be that if we look at the variance, you have your target population, and I've crunched some of the numbers, and I'm not the math scholar, but if the goal is to get within that 1% variance, and I think there are only a couple of districts that are outside of that variance, to me it would make the most logical sense in the path of least resistance to consider how we can accommodate just those variances versus displacing several council members from their seat. I mean, to me, it's if we've got a short timetable and we're looking to push this through in a week, to me, the most prudent course of action would be to consider exactly what I laid out. Where are we on the variance? What districts are heavy? What districts are light? And then make a decision based on that. And the other comment I had was too, and this is concerning just because I'm a lawyer, if we have legal considerations about diluting populations and we don't know what the variance is, it seems to me that the proposals have been made that if you look at District 1, you're looking at a 5% drop in the black population. And is that going to create some kind of legal conflict and prevent us from passing this through? And to me, I think that's part of the analysis. What does the case law say? What is going to make sure that the decision that we make is going to get passed, and then we're not running afoul of something that none of us know right now?
Yeah, I second that too. That was my concern is I feel like there's a lot of push to really focus on making sure these lines are drawn with incumbents first priority. I just want to make sure that we're also considering the other things that are legally required by us. And so how are we getting guidance from this team to ensure those things happen as well as we're drawing these lines? And there are some key definitions that David brought up, like the diluting and like what that exactly means. And I think I also made a note that, District 5, I think there's a 5% percentage difference between the black population and what the census says, and now what this the new line would be in the population, and that's a serious percentage drop, considering if you see that the white population's at 58%. So there's some, to me, that's some serious issues when it comes to voting.
To articulate what I think I'm hearing is one of our guiding principles we're interested in is incumbency protection. Another guiding principle we're interested in is not allowing minority dilution. Is that a fair way to articulate that?
Yeah, and it's also we've been given this 1% variance rule. You know, if you look at the way that each district has grown, you can run the numbers, and I think that was part of the motion I made 2 weeks ago was, how does this break out within that variance with, you know, from the actual population, and we know that we've got to hit this target of 24,977, and then you get that 1% variance either way. Where do all of these districts fall within the variance? And to me, it's if District 2 is heavy, we know that District 2 needs to give up a spot. If District 3 is light, we know that we need to move up somewhere else. Why mess with the other districts, all of them, because scenario C is now completely, I mean, it's not completely, but you're shifting lines when I don't think you necessarily need to do that.
I guess the having the target population, and Ms. Sheftel, correct me if I'm wrong, that goes to the one person, one vote. Is that correct? In terms of our guiding, again, I'm looking at this from a point of view of our commission needs to develop guiding principles in order to make decisions.
Yes, that would go to one person, one vote, and equal protection as well. I wanted, maybe if we could get Ms. Boren to comment on the way she anticipates that the state commission will review these plans and how they will impact their, implement their guiding principles and review.
So I'm not 100% sure how the state will do it, but how I visualize this commission, I think, doing their responsibility is developing, as the chair has said, guiding principles for this commission. Do you want to preserve incumbency? That's one thing. Do you want to protect communities of interest, subdivisions, precincts, areas? You know your federal and state guidelines that you have to do, and that's the one vote and not diluting minority population. But there are other guiding principles that this commission can then look at, like preservation, communities of interest, not splitting subdivisions, not splitting precinct lines. But those are things that this commission has the ability to adopt if they choose to. Now, the state, when they get it, they will look at it and look at that plus or minus ideal population. They will look at things like, are there identifiable boundaries like creeks, roads, interstates that they can identify? If they cannot identify those, then we will not get technical certification of the redistricting plan. Without technical certification, it cannot move forward to council for them to adopt. So technical certification comes from legislative reapportionment, who will look at it to ensure that our plan is technically sound. I say your plan is technically sound, sorry.
Does anyone else have any questions? This is an awful lot of material to digest, I understand that.
Let me ask one question. Might throw a monkey wrench in the program, but what is the significance of having the two at-large counselors? Is there some historical reason for that? Are they really needed? Do you have to have 10? I mean,
that's a matter that's determined under the city charter. The council districts, including the two at-large, are laid out by city charter.
okay. Now, can this body make a recommendation on that while we're doing this redistricting?
Well, actually, the Charter Review Commission is in session right now, and they are about actually to finalize their recommendations and move to public hearings on their recommendations. So obviously, that could be considered, but let me also point out that the schedule that is on is any changes to the charter would not be adopted until November of 2022.
Okay.
So it wouldn't affect this process.
So we could make that recommendation?
Yes, you could make a recommendation, but not to affect this year's process.
All right. So
I think I want some clarity on that. We could make, you're saying we could, and if I understand your question, you're saying eliminate the 2 at-large districts. That sounds like a charter issue, not a, that sounds like not our commission, but please clarify that.
That is true. That would come from the Charter Review Commission.
But you did just say that we could make that recommendation.
I didn't mean you as a commission. I mean, you can make that recommendation to the Charter Review Commission.
Regarding that subject, I believe we used to have 4 districts and 6 at-large. Is that correct? Does anybody historically remember? The Charter Review recommended, 8 and 2, but it used to be either 4 and 6 or 6 and 4, 6 district and 4 at-large. That was done by the Charter Review. So if we recommend anything to them, it's got to be approved next November. So the timing on everything,
That's
maybe
correct.
future, maybe in 2030, but I don't see how it could, the timeline would fit into their timeline, my opinion.
And the Charter Review Commission meets every 10 years, and the commission that met in 2011 actually considered that issue and chose not to recommend any changes for the ballot.
Thank you.
Can you clarify to me again? You said where is the Charter Review Commission right now in terms of, are they, I think someone mentioned it, but I'm having trouble processing.
They are in the process of going through the various articles of the charter and adopting recommended changes to be put out for public comment and then ultimately put on the ballot.
Okay, so there's been no formal, nothing formally in terms of adoption has been issued by the Charter Commission?
No, but it's getting close, and there will be notices of those public hearings and the proposed adoptions. And their meetings are public, and in fact, they are meeting today at 3 o'clock in this very room.
Pam, can I circle back to when you were going through one of the maps, and I made a note here, you said there were 32 people in the technology park, but not a residential area. Well, our Atlanta team is so awesome, they make sure they count the homeless. So I just wanted for the people that's listening to understand there's a special operation that count the homeless. So if we had 32 people in the woods, that awesome team counted those people as well as the people that live off 2nd Avenue in the woods.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to share that for the people that's listening. Thank you.
With that saying, going back to Mr. Hale's initial question about Fort Benton, for clarity, if I'm not mistaken, at our last meeting that we had, right now there are civilians or retirees that live on Fort Benton. And you all calculated those numbers in the numbers that's outside of the 7,000 that's been taken away? Or is those numbers inclusive in the 7,000? That the ones that live in the Muskogee County area right there when you go on Fort Benton?
Anyone who resides on Fort Benning, in that section of Fort Benning that is Muskogee County, they do not vote for council or school board. They only vote for federal and state offices. And it's based on the address of the voter.
Okay. So that's inclusive of those that just come right across from the cemetery, correct?
Is that Fort Benning proper? Give me a street, do you know a street address? I can look it up for you.
I don't know the exact street address. I know that's Battle Creek subdivision.
Give me just a few minutes to look it up.
Check Custer Road.
Custer?
The community is called Battle Park, and it's across Custer. You're right.
Do we have other questions for Ms. Hodge?
I'd like to add, The soldiers that live in barracks, that's a separate thing. For the people that's listening, I know you probably know that, sir, but a lot of times people are not that familiar with how the census works. So for those that live in barracks, they are counted by the Department of Defense, and that's a different process. And again, we're counting people where they are on April 1st, whatever year that is, 2010, 2020, and at 2030, wherever you're breathing on U.S. soil. So you could be there, you could be in Texas on the 30th, but if you're in Muskogee County on April 1st, you got counted here, but if you went back to Texas on the 2nd, and that's where it gets a little tricky. Thank you.
So we have one registered voter on Custer Road, and they are on Fort Benning proper and do not vote in council or school board races on Custer.
Thank you.
Surely we have more questions. This is a lot to digest.
I have a quick question. Are we trying to stay within this timeline to have this done by November the 16th?
I think
Is
that's
that our goal?
farther down on the agenda.
Oh.
So are there other scenarios you would like us to look at? That's a question to the commission. And I heard the minority dilution as well as the incumbent. If you can tell us if you want us to stay within a certain percentage, we can go back and look at scenario C and see how we could meet the request of the commission. We spent hours, I guess, trying to get to the number and to the incumbent and not to divide a subdivision. And we paid attention to the minority dilution as much as we could, but if there is a percentage, I know I heard some of them went 5% up or down. If you want us to try to stay within 2% or 3%, if you can give us that information, we can go back and try to meet the request of the commission.
I mean, I think the problem is that we don't know what, we could throw out there and say 2%, but is 2% gonna comply with the law? And we don't know that. Is 5% gonna comply with the law? We don't know that. And I think that that's something that we need to know. And the other thing is, what I would like to see is a scenario that is the path of least resistance to tinkering with the lines when you've got this target that has been recommended to us of the 1% variance. If you look at the districts, who's heavy, who's light, I think there are only two, how can you then adjust those districts and leave everybody else alone?
And that's what we did in scenario C, but it was kind of a domino effect because we did it by the census tract. So that's why you add or subtract from a district is by a census tract. It's not by a house, it's by census tract, is that correct? Okay, so the census tract is how it tracks it. So it's a block, basically. And so when you add it in, sometimes it would add, like if an apartment complex was that census tract, it would add in 2,000 residents. And so we pull that out and we'd add this area in. So in order to stay within those census tract, not splitting a census tract.
Do you have to keep the census tract as it is, or can you split it?
The block, down to the block.
So it is possible then to come up with a scenario that can account to the best that you can to cover the variance plus or minus and not disrupt the other districts based on census tracts.
I guess my response would be that's what we tried to do with scenario C.
With the census tract, but not dividing it down to the block.
No, I mean the smallest, the block is the smallest,
Okay,
sorry.
got
So
it.
that's how we did block by block when we were trying to make those adjustments. Yes, sir.
Ms. Sheffield, you wanted to comment on, I think, Mr. Rodwater's first question about how do we know whether or not, what is the amount of delusion that would raise concerns?
On the dilution, my understanding is we're never going to have an absolute set percentage that we know is a safe harbor. You know, that is the type of thing that is reviewed by the courts on a case-by-case basis. We do, however, on the population variance, have the 1% guidance, which I assume the state will use in their technical review. And one thing, additional point, just sort of from a standpoint of common sense to me that I think should be taken into account in the dilution, it's not so much just the absolute percentage, but the impact of that percentage as applies to the district as a whole. In other words, going from 85% to 80% might not be a problem, whereas going from 52 to 47 could be.
In the work that you have completed, are you aware of any subdivisions that might be split? Or did you work to make sure that did not occur?
We worked to make sure that we did not divide a subdivision. Now, I won't say that we didn't divide a neighborhood, because some neighborhoods are multiple streets and it's not necessarily a subdivision where you have an entrance and the subdivision loops around. So in some areas, it might be multiple streets. If there's a subdivision name for those multiple streets, I can't say that we never divided, but that was the intention when we were looking at it, was not to divide a subdivision. Yes, sir.
Could you show us an example of what you're talking about? I looked, there's a couple of things I was going to mention. Do we need to, Mr. Chairman, do we need to narrow our focus and let's say, I personally think scenario A and B are not an option. Focus on C, and then ask to see the neighborhood configuration and where things could possibly be tweaked to make it better. Do we need to have a motion to exclude A and B, or should we just?
Well, I think probably let's have, what I think I'm hearing everyone say, and I don't know if we need to make a motion right at this moment, is that the best guess that the city was able to come up with is scenario C, and it might make sense to try to talk about tweaking scenario C as opposed to, I mean, you can make a motion to rule out scenario A and B, but I think my thought is let's keep talking about this before we start limiting and making motions at this point.
I think what you did in C is great, and I think we just need to look at neighborhoods and what could be adjusted.
Yes, sir.
Personally.
Yes, sir. This is one of the areas that would be called a neighborhood, Averett Woods, and it does split between the two districts, but not necessarily a subdivision, but it is a neighborhood. So this is one example where there was a neighborhood, and again, this was an incumbent that lived on the edge, so trying to maintain the incumbents in their district was one of our guiding principles. And again, that's to the commission if you want us to not think about that. Obviously, you know, that is one of the state's guiding principles, and so we use that as well.
So in this, the yellow part is the yellow part represents Averett Woods, and that's the new suggested.
Yes, ma'am.
I remember how that Windsor Park is split between 2 and 5. I don't live near there, but I just remember that's a big, I don't know if you call that a neighborhood or subdivision. It does have an entry. And is Windsor Park put back together in C? I can't tell without a magnifying glass.
We'll look at Windsor Park. Windsor Park looks like it is in District 5.
It used to be split, I think, on Seton. I think half of Seton was in 2 and half.
And you can see in this place right here. So before it was probably split in that part of.
That is not.
That's not Windsor.
Is that something we can pull up on the map?
Ventura is not in Windsor Park.
Okay.
I remember not knowing about Seton Drive, whether west or east was 2 or 5, and I remember thinking it certainly would be nice if neighborhoods like that were in one district. But.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, can you turn on the mic?
Second district.
Number 2, can you scroll to District 2? Yes, sir.
And sort of drill down, this is an example of what I'm thinking about. If you look at, just take treetops. See, treetops is currently in 2, and it's going to be in 8.
That's correct.
And so, like, I would say, should we look over on Weems Road and maybe adjust there? Those are the kind of things I saw when I saw the map, to just see, could it be adjusted and maintain the racial equity?
Yes, sir.
That's the kind of tweaking that I think other districts would have, because I live in 2, I thought of that.
Right.
So, okay?
This is one whole block of big city.
Yeah. Yeah, and we and again, we can go back and make some adjustments to try to, you know, instead of pulling from, because District 2 was one of the districts that we needed to pull from because
Correct.
the population had grown. And so we looked at this area and then scroll over to the east. And so we were cautious because District 6, which is in the yellow, also had grown, and so we had to pull from that. So we were cautious about moving from District 2 to District 6, because then that just puts more
I see.
districts. So
That's great.
yes, sir.
That's an example of what I'd like to maybe see.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Hodge?
Yes.
I agree with David, what he stated earlier. And I think that, I know that we're looking at a timeline on this, but I think we're going to be moving too fast. It's going to take a little bit more time.
Yes.
Because me looking back at District 1's map, and, you know, I got some concerns there and things. And so I just think that we probably need to just slow down the process. I know we're trying to meet a timeline, but there's some things that concerns me with the new boundaries for District 1.
Well, does anyone else have any other questions of Ms. Hodge? Because I do think that is the next thing on the agenda that we do need to talk about. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hodge. I know that this is a lot of hard work, and we've had to do it very quickly. 2020 was a very unusual year. The factors that I'm aware of that were COVID-related delays was, it's my understanding that some of the members of the commission were not picked at the last decennial grand jury, but at the first decennial grand jury. Also, as I think everyone in the room and hopefully everyone on TV is aware, census numbers were delayed in coming to us. And that, I think, did have a big impact on scheduling and as we're all thinking about right now, the possible consequences for the 2022 elections. To that end, I definitely do want to hear from everybody about the need, whether or not there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, any of the attorneys and others involved here, there is nothing requiring us to stick to the schedule that was proposed in the PowerPoint presentation, because as I said, this is an awful lot of information to digest. Having said that, there will be consequences in terms of, well, actually, I think the consequences will be, and correct me if I'm wrong, the council lines would not go into effect until 2024, and it also may impact what the school board decides to do. Is that a correct statement, Ms. Sheftel or Mr. Ellington?
Yes, that is correct.
So I do think the commission as a whole should, I think we should have a discussion as to whether or not we want to stick to this deadline, understanding the consequences. Mr. Ellington, I don't want to put you on the spot, but as I said, I do think that we have to factor in, if we want to keep the lines the same, which might be one of our guiding principles, then I think we have to talk about this very, very tight deadline that was proposed in the PowerPoint.
So from the school district's perspective, it is not bound by the same time limitation that is in your city charter that is one of the primary considerations that you have in front of you in terms of that November 4th or November 5th timetable. We do have some timelines, but it's not stemming from the same timelines and deadlines that are determining some of the considerations that you've heard about how you got to that suggestion. So we're monitoring the timelines, but don't let that be a consideration for y'all. You all are on a tighter timeline, quite frankly, than the school district would be.
But if you chose if you're not bound by the 6-month timeline and decided to go ahead and use the new lines, then technically the districts would not be the same for this election, which is the goal of trying to put them together.
And I guess this is all based, our tight deadline is based upon a primary in May 25th, 2022, is that correct? May 24th? So, and that actually, we don't have any control over the infinite wisdom of the Georgia legislature. And I don't know really what, because that 6-month provision in the charter, I think, is what's tying our hands on the deadlines.
And I guess the other thing, and Lucy can correct me if I'm wrong, but, and this was mentioned, I believe, at the first meeting that this commission held, and that is the consequence of not getting it done in time for the May elections of 2022 is that the current lines would be the applicable lines. So it's not as though you cannot conduct elections. You'd be conducting the elections under the status quo. So,
Judge, I think it's more important, and I'm just speaking as a prior census worker, it's more important for me to get it right than to be in a hurry. I know this process, not just here locally, but all across the nation, it's a political hot button. People are watching very closely. I think it's important that it's transparent, that it's fair, and the appropriate amount of time. If you are a GIS or a census expert, this is something you could probably digest very quickly, but just listening to people when they introduce themselves, this is something that is not in their normal wheelhouse. I just think it's important so when there are no thereafters. So I would agree with Mr. Hickey. For me personally, I think it's important that we do it right. And I think to try to check every box, make sure everything is fair and equitable, legal, and all of that, because the gentleman here had a question about the percentages and that kind of thing. I just don't see it happening by next week. And I would just like to just share that. That's not to try to put a stop on the process, but I just think in order with so much information, as you stated earlier, it's a lot of information if you're not accustomed to working with this. So that's just my opinion. Thank you.
I think it's a lot of information, even for those that are accustomed to working with this. And I think you do bring up another point that the commission should consider in terms of these deadlines. I think it's very important for the general public to have as much input into what we are doing as possible. My concern, well, as I said, I think it goes back to guiding principles. And one of our guiding principles in terms of how this commission conducts itself, I think, is it's going to be very, very important for the community as a whole to have adequate notice and an opportunity to be heard.
I do have a question. How are we going to go about tweaking the districts, the numbers, and how are we going to address the concerns that we have about specific districts?
And Ms. Hodge, it's my understanding that we can, any commission member could ask could ask if we draw a different map or we talk about tweaking. As I said, I think this is an awful lot of information to digest at the first meeting where we're seeing maps.
And absolutely, we can go back, we can bring you more options, we can look at what we did in C and make some of the adjustments based on the comments that I've heard today, and bring you back, you know, more options, and maybe provide more specific information to show that if we add this census tract back in and take this one out, what does that do to numbers? So maybe even walk you through that process that we went through and share that and bring you back more options. We're happy to do that.
So just so I can be clear about this, we're okay with any commission member making requests for other maps. And the city will be happy to try their best to accommodate that at say, the next meeting.
Absolutely.
I have a quick question. There are some, just for myself, I actually would like to be able to play around with some things and move stuff around. Is it possible for us to put the census information and maps in a free or open source redistricting tool so that some of the members could mess around with the maps if they wanted to?
I think we only have so many licenses.
Like Dave's redistricting tool or something like that?
So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if the commission would like to appoint a subcommittee to kind of work on looking at some of these districts, maybe as a subcommittee, and come back to the full commission with a report. Working with GIS, that's certainly something that the commission could choose to do if possible. Secondly, I think the commission needs to speak with a unified voice when asking for additional plans. So if you're asking for additional plans now, if you would let staff know perhaps how many additional plans you would like to look at, because, you know, requests from several different people, you might end up with requests for 5 plans, but
We could end up with 17.
Correct,
plans.
right. So if, you know, if it could be a...
Right, I guess, I think right now we're still talking about the scheduling and whether or not we're going to be able to meet the deadline proposed to not affect the to have new districts in 2022. But I do think you make a very good point about perhaps having a subcommittee for those that want to hang out with the GIS people for a while.
And also, if I want to respond to Mr. Perkins first, we only have so many licenses for the GIS software that we have, and that's only 6 licenses, which is from our IT department and our planning staff. But we're happy if anybody wants to come in as we're, you know, going through and making these adjustments. It's, you know, we can do it at a work session, you know, right here if you want us to do that at the next meeting. We can kind of show you how it works. We're happy to show you how it works now, but it's not as simple as click here and click there. It's a little more technical than that, but we're happy to handle it however the commission would like us to.
Yeah, I was, I think, asking more about like the information. There are free tools, free redistricting tools that we could use that wouldn't require licenses for the group. So I was just kind of chatting about that. But I can perhaps, Mr. Chair, we can speak with the guys in GIS and just have a discussion
Absolutely.
with them about that.
Yes, sir.
Some of that, about the timeline, maybe that would have to do with, and I agree with Ms. Strode and everybody, but UD had brought up something about should we decide on which scenario, which would sort of help with the timeline, whether we stick with the 16th or whatever. I think it's good to just say, okay, we're going to go with scenario C, which would help you focus and help us focus on, okay, we're just going to work on this one and we can move these numbers. Is that, and I think somebody said, should we vote, have a motion to agree on
actually,
that?
that's what I was about to ask you is,
okay.
Are you making a motion that we should start working off of scenario C with the understanding that we might want to have a subcommittee to sit down with the GIS people on specific tweaks?
Yes, I make a motion on all of that.
Whoever's taking that down,
For those that are making a second for the recording and minutes purposes, would you state your name for the record, please? And who's making the motion?
Wayne Hale's making the motion on all of what the judge said.
Gloria Strode, second.
Now second.
Okay.
U.D. Roberts.
Okay, so did whoever's taking the minutes get that?
She's back there. Yes, Millicent in the back is taking minutes, so thank you. We appreciate that.
One more quick question, if I could jump in. Just looking at these maps for scenario C, you've got the total population and the deviation. Is the deviation based on the?
Is this part of the discussion on the motion?
No, sorry.
Okay. And actually, would you mind restating what I said?
It's recording. I'm not writing it down. It's recorded. I'm sorry.
It's being recorded.
Oh, before we call for a vote on the motion.
I make a motion
I
that
think
the motion was that we agree to accept scenario C and as our general operating form, and that we would also consider going into subcommission to discuss some of the changes.
And that's been seconded. Do we have any other discussion?
Yes. The comment I'm going to make kind of goes back to what Mr. Hickey said earlier about us slowing down just a little bit. I just received this information, I think, I can't remember which night it was, but it was like 11 o'clock at night, so I've had very little time to look over anything we have. So I know we've talked a little bit about incumbency protection and things like that, but if we're going to allow for more time on this process, I think it would be best if everyone took some time to look through everything we have, really think through how we want to proceed with this, and then move forward before we start kind of cutting away at things. So that's just my personal feeling about it.
So to understand, does that say we should, as to the motion, we don't want to start working off of scenario C?
Yes, I would say we hold off on that until, hold off on making that decision until the next meeting at least.
Can I speak to the motion?
Please.
I recommend we narrow the focus because of these people back here. I would hate for people to have to be looking at scenario A and B, and they're working hard as it is. And I would think if we need to narrow what we're doing and consider the staff. So that's why I would support this. Yes.
Any other comments on the motion?
So I'm trying to understand, Mr. Perkins, are you saying we not vote on the motion at this time?
Yeah, I would say my feeling is is to not move forward on getting rid of option A and B just because of the amount of time we've had A, B, and C in front of us. So just taking another, I guess, week or so to just look over everything and digest all of the information we have before we make any decisions about getting rid of particular options or anything like that.
But if A and B, we know is sort of infringing upon others, moving people out of their different
Well,
districts?
I think, at least the way I took it, I think there's still some questions about, I know at least what I heard was the state has preferences, but that it's not a requirement. So if that is correct, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but they have a preference, but it is not a requirement. And so I just think that we should, again, I would prefer to have a little bit of time to think through all of this before I move forward with removing any options that we've looked at for 48 hours.
And I just, as part of this discussion, I'm going to keep harping back to us thinking what should be our guiding principles. Because I think that really goes to everything. Again, some of the guiding principles that are, I guess, implicit in Mr. Hales' motion is about incumbent protection and dealing with dilution and one person, one vote. And my own thought is that we have to have something to start working with. Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Would you please restate the motion? I'm sorry, I was out coughing.
Mr. Hales, one more time.
I do want everybody to know I have a bad cough, but I did get tested and don't have COVID. So.
Okay, I'll try to remember what I said.
Had to leave for a cough.
The motion is to accept scenario C.
Oh, okay.
And also go into subcommittees to discuss the changes that might be needed in those, in terms of the numbers.
Okay, so the motion is not to accept the final form, it in final form, but just to narrow to C. Okay.
Absolutely.
Understand.
Just to, my understanding is just to narrow, so we have a framework to start working on with a subcommittee that then can work through other, what I would, for lack of a better way of putting it, tweaks.
Right, thank you.
Did I articulate that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, I guess is there any more discussion?
I'd like to say that with scenario C, incumbent preservation is important to me, and I will fight for that, to keep these counselors in an area where they have worked for and worked for the citizens and worked for everybody within the government as long as they have, rather than just taking a chance and writing somebody out.
Well, and as I said, while I don't want to have a motion on guiding principles, I just want everyone to have those in their mind as we discuss this. We have a motion, we had a second. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? You get the numbers? All opposed? With my bad vision, I believe the motion passed. Okay, moving on, and I think implicit in this...
Mr. Chair, do you want to establish a subcommittee at this point now to, since that was part of the motion?
I have no opposition to doing that, or do we want to talk about the subcommittee before or after talking about the scheduling of our next meetings? Okay. And I actually think to some extent that needs, that does make sense that we need to talk about it. Here's what I'm hearing, and I don't know if, I do think we need to formalize this. I'm hearing from the entire commission that this is a lot of information to digest, and that it would be very, and this goes in terms of my important guiding principles about notice and an opportunity to be heard by the public as a whole. We are not going to be able to meet the November 4th deadline to make a final recommendation to the commission. Is that a fair summary? So in light of that, do I have a motion about when we would want, one thing, I do want all of these meetings to be broadcasts. I do want, I want to err on the side of giving everyone an ample opportunity to have any comments, any concerns raised, whether they're part of the commission or part of the general public. But I also want us to do our work diligently. So my thought is that I would like to schedule meetings weekly. And I also think, to be honest with you all, a lot of folks that might want to have something to say about this meeting are probably at work right now. So I think we should also consider meetings in the evening.
Yes, sir.
In light of that, do I have so next week, Ms. Hodge, you said that this room is available. We don't want to do it on Election Day, although I guess we could early vote today, couldn't we?
So this room is available Monday, the 1st at 5 o'clock, 5:30, and it's also available on Wednesday, November the 3rd, next week, if you want to meet in the evenings. And then I can check the schedule for, if you let me know dates, times, days of the week, and make sure that this council chambers is available during that time.
Is the 4th is available for the 4th of November in the evening? 1st through the 4th.
I can check on that.
I thought I saw the 4th up there at one point.
Ms. Sheftel, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make one comment just for the benefit of the committee. There is a very small outside chance that the General Assembly will move the primary by 1 month. It's been requested by numerous local jurisdictions. It's not expected that they will do that. We will know during the special session in November whether they are. So I would urge the commission to keep moving in the because it's the possibility we may have through December to get this done.
Well, and we can, as I said, I don't want to predict the infinite wisdom of the Georgia General Assembly, but I do think that we need to keep moving forward. Do I have a motion on when we would like to meet next week? And to that end, I don't know if we got the answer about whether the 4th is available.
I guess the better question is, how much time does the city need to prepare other scenarios? I mean, based on C and kind of moving things around.
I mean, a day. I mean,
So there's no reason we couldn't meet Monday at 5:30 if we have that information.
Though I think we're going to talk about forming a subcommittee too, so they might want a day or two to get together and talk to the city. If we were to meet on Monday, that would mean that subcommittee would probably have to get with the folks from the city tomorrow or Monday, and I just think that sounds a little bit tight.
Yeah, I think the third.
Judge?
Yes.
I think it's important that people have a chance, as Mr. Perkins, to study and review. Otherwise, it's just like being on a merry-go-round. So I think Monday would be too soon. It's just like doing your homework, where you just have to have a moment to review. You might want to confer with someone. You have a question. We've had a couple sidebars here, and I just think it's important for us to be able to move forward, that people have had time to actually review the information, because it is a lot.
So are you saying that next week is too soon?
No, I'm saying next Monday is too soon. Today is, what, Thursday? That's just too soon. And then we have election on Tuesday.
Right.
Right. So I think that would be too soon.
I would even say probably next week might be too soon, especially if you do a subcommittee, to have a chance to meet. And that's just me talking. You know, if you pull together the subcommittee now, they would need a chance to meet next week, and then they might have some information that they would want some maps drawn to get to the GIS folks. So maybe coming back at a group in 2 weeks.
So let's ask about the availability of this room in 2 weeks.
I don't mean to speak for everyone, and I understand.
Oh, no, I mean, and we haven't had
if we're not going to work on that timeline anyway, and we're going to be fair.
CSC Council Chambers. Okay, so just as a reminder, 2 weeks from today is Veterans Day. So this
We won't be meeting
building
on
will not be
Veterans Day.
meeting that day. But go back a week.
This is next week.
We may want to think about scheduling the commission as a whole in 2 weeks and letting the subcommittee meet next week.
Okay, so next week, this room would be available Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, next week. First, the 3rd and the 4th of next week, and then go to the next week.
So what about next Thursday then?
Next Thursday, the 4th, it would be available.
Afternoon, would the afternoon one be available next Thursday?
Yes.
But that would be with the subcommittee, though.
We don't have a motion, we're just, we talking what I think makes sense, given that this is so much to digest, is that perhaps the subcommittee meets next week, and I don't know that it has to meet in this room. Commission meeting the following.
Yeah, so we can meet in my office with a subcommittee. It does not have to be, the subcommittee would not need to be televised, I'm assuming.
No, it would need to be noticed as an open meeting. Once you create an official subcommittee of a committee, then its meetings are open.
And then, and my understanding of, but your office could still accommodate the public if they were to.
Absolutely, yes.
And the notice requirement for open meetings is 24 hours? Okay. Is there more discussion about when we should meet?
So if that's the case, then we need to take it, my suggestion is we establish a subcommittee so the subcommittee can decide on when they can meet versus us deciding when that subcommittee meets.
I do have a question about the whole subcommittee formation. Shouldn't anybody of this group who wants to be on the subcommittee be on it? I would hate for people to feel like
if the whole body wants to be on it?
Decisions were being made outside the whole group. I understand the unwieldy nature of trying to get everybody together, but at the same time, I also understand the problem of cutting somebody out of a
Right, well,
discussion.
Again, well, I think I really do want to talk about, and I share your concern, Mr. Williams, about wanting to do this, but I also want to be honest with you, keep pressure on the commission to continue to meet regularly.
I agree about that.
Just as a suggestion I have for us to consider, in terms of when the commission meets, I think it may be easier for the public just to know when we meet if we pick a day and a time and just do that on a regular basis. So like Thursday at 5:30 or Thursday at 6 or something like that may be easier for us to just do that every week, and in cases of a holiday, we just don't meet.
Is it an option to keep the Thursday from 10 to noon? That's what I had originally put on the calendar as just a reoccurring, as just evenings are hard.
We'll have to have, excuse me, I'm sorry, we have to have some evening meetings for those that work because it's open to the public in case they want to be present, have feedback. I mean, that's just, even with the charter review, Mary Sue and I served on that before. So that's a part of making sure that the public has access. It doesn't have to be every time, but you got to have some.
Ms. Hodge, to the point about scheduling a regular time, and we can vote on whether or not it should be in the evening or during the day, is there a regular day that this room is available, let's say through the month of November? Saturday.
Thursday, we could meet Thursday the 4th. The following Thursday, November 11th, is a holiday. The next would be November 18th. Does that work, Jeremy? November 18th. Then the following Thursday is Thanksgiving. So you could
Thursdays
meet
don't sound that great.
Well, just for the month of November, probably not the best day, but the commission could meet the 4th and the 18th. And maybe every other week is an option for the commission.
Wednesdays, Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, are those the days that this room's available, generally speaking?
Tuesday, council day.
Right, I knew,
typically. So
I didn't say.
I would say, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday for the most part. Except we can provide, how about we provide you a schedule? If you can set the next meeting date, and then we'll provide a complete schedule of when it's available. And if the entire commission is going to be this subcommittee, we might as well meet in here and we can go through that exercise with the entire commission.
Okay, well, do I have a motion about when we should meet as a whole commission next?
Make a motion that we meet as a whole on the 4th of November.
Jerome Williams, second.
Do we have a second? I'm sorry.
5:30.
Jerome, second.
Okay. And did we state the time?
5:30.
So we have a motion and second that the committee as a whole meet again on the 4th of November at 5:30. That's Thursday.
Mm-hmm. This will be a work session, sort of like?
No, I'm assuming these are all.
Well, you know what I mean.
But, yeah, so do we have any, well, actually, that's another question. Do we want the committee as a whole, or do we want the subcommittee to meet on November 4th?
I think what Ms. Polly was saying, I guess if everyone wants to be here, that's.
Well, I don't know that we got there about it, whether everyone wants to be on the subcommittee. So we have a motion and second on the committee as a whole meeting next Thursday at 5:30. Do we have any other discussion? Well, I'm concerned that that's too soon, especially if we're going to have a subcommittee. That's my discussion on this.
Maybe we could just scrap the subcommittee and have the 4th be the day that we all meet and we go through these scenarios together at the same time.
One option you could have would be to set a meeting as a work session, not a voting meeting, and that way any member who was interested in participating in the work session could come, but the vote on the plan would not be taken at such a meeting, and then you would advertise a full meeting of a voting meeting of the commission.
In light of Ms. Scheftel's suggestion, do we have an amendment to the motion?
I'll make the amendment.
So now the motion is that we will meet for a work session on November 4th at 5:30. Any more discussion? I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, do you have discussion?
Well, it's another question, I guess, about, are we going to schedule when we're going to meet after that?
I think Ms. Hodge said she didn't know about availability. Let's finish up let's get up through this motion and then we can talk about that too. Do we have any opposition to setting a work session meeting for November 4th at 5:30? Hearing none, the motion passed. Now, Ms. Smith, you said you wanted to talk, well, if you don't mind, let's talk more about whether we want to just continue with work sessions of folks as a whole with no vote, or do we want to talk about setting up a specific subcommittee? Any thoughts on that?
I think that scrapping the subcommittee would be my idea if we just have work sessions, and if those members on the commission want to come and participate, they're obviously able to do that. But to me, it's if we're going to continue to push the ball, which we obviously need to do and wrap up our work in an expedient manner, that makes, in my opinion, the most sense. And it accommodates, I think, Mr. Hale's suggestion. That
I would agree with that. That's perfect.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too. Okay, and anyone? Ms. Smith, you said you had, I guess you wanted to talk about future meetings, understanding that Thursdays won't necessarily work in November.
Right, but I guess we'll wait and get a schedule from Ms. Hodge.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We'll wait and get the schedule when the room's available.
So we'll get the schedule of when this room is available, and we'll send that out tomorrow. And then I guess I can't vote at the work session.
Okay.
And just as another note, is it possible for us to go ahead and schedule every single meeting from here? Once we get that full schedule, let's go ahead and put everything. It's hard to work only a week in advance on calendar invites.
I agree.
I agree with that too. Although then that might make, if we're going to vote on setting the schedule for going forward next week, then that doesn't turn into a work session anymore, does it?
Well, we can do what we do with council and say that there will be a consent agenda to vote on meeting schedules and no other matter.
Do we need a motion and second on that, or?
Yes.
Do I have a motion?
Is this a motion on?
This is a motion.
Motion on whether or not to vote next week on
that
anything.
that we will have a consent agenda so that we can vote on setting the schedule going forward next Thursday at 5:30.
Well, I so move for the purpose of moving along.
I'll second Wayne Hales.
Discussion? Any opposition? Motion passes. So as I said, I think this is important. One of my guiding principles is going to be letting everyone have their day and have their say. Does anyone in the audience have any questions about any matters that we've discussed today.
Your Honor, Mr. Chair, my name is Marvin Broadwood, a senior, and I would like to make a couple of comments. And I want to applaud you, first of all, for saying that everyone can't come to this meeting. Even if you have it at 5:30, everyone can't come to the meeting. There are some folks in this community that have 2 jobs. Now, when I look around the room, I only see 3 people or 4 people that really don't have to be here. So I want you to consider that. And I'd ask, as a recommendation, Mr. Chair, is that you think about formulating a smaller version of your commission and bringing it to the public in a personal setting. As you said earlier, and I watch you all digest this material, and it's obvious that a lot of you are not familiar with it as I am. I got the word to be here at 9 o'clock this morning, and the meeting was told 10 o'clock, but I got here and it didn't start until 11. So those type of things, we've got to be considerate of our general public as you digest, deliberate, and discuss this issue, because this is a huge issue to this community, especially as Ms. Polly said, it's a hot button. It's election year, and everybody in this room knows what happened in 2020. We don't want anything like that to happen in 2022. So I would just recommend, plead with you all to bring this to the public, and I apologize for my outburst of saying the room is always open on Saturday. Always. Just think about that for a second. You don't have to have a long, drawn-out meeting, but just something. I've sat in with Ms. Bourne, I've sat in a meeting, and I was the only citizen on a Saturday. The only citizen. But you have to give your public due notice, and you have to provide them the opportunity to appear before you. Thank you, especially thank you for your service, because I know a lot of you are retired. You could be doing a whole lot of other things than being here serving your community. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Harry Underwood. I live at 8082 Veterans Parkway in District 6. Thank you, Judge and Commissioners, for meeting today. I wanted to ask regarding the public input, and especially that only a few of the residents of the city who are not commissioners are here present. And one thing I've been asking, and I sent this to City Council regarding the commission, is to have a website or a web page on the city website, columbusga.gov, for dedicated to redistricting, the redistricting process. That shows maps, that has links to the PDFs and maps and the GIS data and GIS packages, so that people in the public can also use this data as well, as Dominic was suggesting. But having a page dedicated to that with proper links, and also a form for public comment. Because this is what the General Assembly is already doing, even though I do not agree at all with their partisan process or drawing their own districts, which at least we have a technically nonpartisan commission-based process for drawing the districts here in Columbus. That we don't have a dedicated page or an online means of public comment in the off hours between this meeting and the next meeting and further on. So that's something I hope that the commission can look at, creating a web page dedicated to redistricting and a public comment form so that people can submit their comments online and say and offer their input on redistricting and respective to their own communities, their own neighborhoods. Second, prison gerrymandering. This is something I know it's not a law, it's not required under Georgia law, unfortunately, to consider about prison gerrymandering, which is the process by which prisoners in the state, across the states are counted as residents of the prisons in which they are incarcerated rather than the residents of their last voluntary domicile. And what I'm hoping for this commission to look at as a guideline to adopt is to count residents in this, based on the census, count residents who are also currently imprisoned in other parts of the state, or at Muskogee County Prison, or outside of the states, who were last residing here in Columbus, to continue to count them as residents of the city of Columbus for purposes of redistricting. The reason why is because the redistricting process, the census counts, again, as counts prisoners as the residents of their prisons, but they are also not counted as voters because of Georgia law saying that they are not allowed to vote. So what I'm hoping, well, and to further on, if we're not counting them as voters, then why is it that our state government and local governments, including in the areas where they are incarcerated, count them as residents of those areas, which helps inflate for state legislative purposes and congressional purposes and maybe even local purposes their numbers, their population numbers, and configure their borders and districts based on, on them being residents, even though they cannot vote. So I'm hoping that the city, that this commission can look into counting prisoners who last resided here in Columbus as residents rather than as residents of the city rather than residents of their prisons. Finally, I was hearing a lot about dilution regarding voter dilution, and especially of minority voter dilution. What I'm hoping to, and I'm surprised that no discussion was paid to the ideas of coalition districts, opportunity districts, and influence districts. I hope that the members of the commission can look at these three terms because they show different levels of not dilution, but rather the presence of minority voters in communities, so that within these districts, so that when they cast their votes and everything, that they still have, at least in terms of the influence district, their representation and a share of the vote that influences the result in that district, or opportunity districts where ethnic majority voters can vote, may cross over to vote for the minority preference candidates. And finally, coalition voters, where more than one minority demographic and district may have stronger influence or make a majority in order to cast a vote for their for a minority preference candidate. I'm hoping that that out of those 8 districts, that when you draw these districts, that you look at those 3 terms, even though they're not required by the VRA, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that you look at those ideas and pair it with the idea of dilution, so that you can have not just have African Americans and other minorities packed into districts, or packed and cracked into districts. We should be moving away from packing and cracking, because I keep hearing from many members of this community that we have gerrymandering in this city, and especially racial gerrymandering. That's something I hope that we can avoid, and that we can allow for coalition, opportunity, and influence districts. That's my public comment. Thank you so much.
Well, going to the first part of your comment about posting things on the city's websites, Ms. Hodge, can you address that?
Yes, we will make that happen. We will create a link on the homepage to a districting commission page, and what we will post there will be what we have presented to this commission so far. So we obviously won't post anything that doesn't come to the commission first. So we'll post the maps that you saw today, the PowerPoint presentation, the minutes, and the agenda. And then as the commission receives information, then following that, we'll post that to the website. So yes, and we'll have an ability for people to make comments or ask questions. Those will be sent to staff, and we can provide those questions and responses at the next commission meeting. So we'll work on that and get that done.
Thank you.
Is it also possible to post the upcoming dates of the meetings and then also the recording? So a link to wherever people can watch it live, just for those who cannot attend, have direct access on a website where if they can't be here in person, they can watch it at a later time and they can still ask the same questions even though they may not be able to do it in person.
Yes, so this is televised live today,
All right.
and then it will be rebroadcast over CCG TV, and we also have the YouTube channel, but we can create that link on the Districting Commission's page to that broadcast. So yes, we'll take care of that.
Yes. And thank you so much for that as well. I know I was like kind of badgering a little bit about that. So, and yeah, so, and if y'all have any discussions about prison gerrymandering or coalition opportunity and influence districts, there are many websites and links for that, for those resources as well. Thank you.
And to that end, I think the commission heard you, and as I said, I wanted everyone in their minds to be formulating what are guiding principles, so. Yeah.
Bruce Huff, City Council, District 3 Representative. Thank you to the commission for slowing the process down. I had mentioned that a few weeks ago, that not here, but in a council session, that I ran during the census of 2010. And during that time, everything was going on. They were collecting data, everything. 2011, I took office, and they were digesting the numbers. 2012, an election took place, but they were still working on the maps. We did not get our new maps until March of 2013. So I thank you all for slowing the process down, because in my situation, if you take a good look at District 3, I'm being ripped apart. You're saving a lot of people, but you're ripping me apart. To David, is it Rowetter? Did I get your name right? Yes, sir. Okay. To his point, if you look at the existing maps without trying to move us out of our districts, my district has grown. I only needed maybe 300-400 people. So all you had to do at the top of my district is move me to the right or the left. It doesn't matter, either way, and pick up what you need and move on. And so I request that when you start looking at the maps, that you go back to what's existing right now and see with the ones that are affected, then can you just move us right or left, and everything works at that point. And my last point is, at this late date, I thank you for slowing it down. And I am one that wants to run under the existing lines now without changing anything before next year, because we and the other counselors and people, school district members that have been working for these last 8 years under the new lines, we've been working for our constituents very hard to get things accomplished, and it would be nice to give them the opportunity to re-elect us. So thank you for all your work. I think I've covered everything here. The public hearings was covered about trying to have, at 5:30 sometimes, maybe a Saturday meeting in order for people to get here. That's what we have to do with our city council meetings. And the timetable you slowed down. So in the census blocks, when you get ready to move, when you look at the top of District 3, you just move to one whole block. It won't break up anything, because they have me back almost where I started in 2010. And the district has grown. And as I mentioned to a few people, met a lot of good people over the years. So I just request that we get to stay, because my understanding is there are maybe 2 districts that are being affected mostly. So it should be not a hard problem when you get through. It was requested that you all would be working with the census tracts and everything on the system, the GIS system. So it should be an easy fix for all 10 of us, well, 2 at large, all 8 of us that have districts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Huff. Do you have any other comments?
Yes, sir. If I may, the gentleman had a question about the census and the counting of prisons. That is group quarters. This commission, based on my experience as an employee of the U.S. Census Bureau for 2 decennials, this commission does not decide about the prisoners and how they're counted, that is something that goes at a higher level. Prisoners are counted where they are on April 1st, whatever that, every 10 years, as well as college students. And so for all of the parents here in Columbus, I love to use this example, that sent their children to the University of Georgia. In 2010, they were able to get another congressional seat because it was so many college kids there. So wherever you are on April 1st, breathing, not dead people, breathing on April 1st, that's where you're counted. So for the prison, we have the Muskogee prison, we have the state prison, Rutledge, we got the children's YDC, RYDC. We have to count them here as with Stewart County. And that is a political argument that comes up every time because we had a commissioner in Stewart County that was concerned that the people in prison there, you know, they were not residents. But it's wherever you are breathing on April 1st. So we don't have the authority to change that. That's higher, if that's something that you would like to reach out to the U.S. Census Bureau. Thank you.
If I could, Harry, I just want to be clear, what you're talking about when you're talking about gerrymandering of prisons, are you talking about the counting of it? Is your concern the count, or is your concern that prisoners are being used toward the totals that we're, because I have a concern about this too, we're just talking about a lot of information. My thought is, and you tell me if you're thinking the same thing and if this was the basis of your question, is that if we're not counting Fort Benning residents toward the 206,000 person total because they don't get a vote on city council, that we should also not count prisoners who are housed at Rutledge because they also will not be able to vote, at least for the time that they're going to be in prison in Columbus. Is that your concern, or are you concerned about how the count is being done?
Well, not necessarily the census count, because the census count, we cannot change that. You're right, Mr. Oda. What it is that when they do redistricting, then they don't include the numbers or the residences of or the last voluntary residences of these prisoners who are now incarcerated wherever else and everything, but were previously residents of the city or of their specific of that specific neighborhood in the city. And when they redraw the map, they don't include the numbers of those who are now residents in those prisons. So when they do that, that means that there's more. You're right. Right, because they're still citizens, however, and they should. The position, especially from folks like Fair Fight and Fair Districts Georgia, is that when they do redistricting, that these prisoners, when they are counted, well, not when they're counted, but when the maps are redrawn, the districts are redrawn, that they include the numbers and whatever redistricting authority would be able to do this, they will be able to do this. It's not about the census here, like the census is only just counting the prisoners, but rather this redistricting authority would then redraw the map to include those individuals in the final drawing of the map. So that's pretty much what it is. Not about the counting and everything. It's just about when they accounting for them in the map. So that's something that lots of organizations, including the Prison Policy Institute, have amazing resources on about prison gerrymandering and why at least 10 states as of this year have banned prison gerrymandering for purposes of state legislative and congressional districting. And I believe in Tennessee, they've also done that at least for allowing for counties to prohibit prison gerrymandering, which is interesting. It's unique among the states in doing that. So thank you. Anything else on that? Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else want to comment on anything that's gone on today?
I have one more, and I'm sorry, this is the last thing.
That's fine.
Just because we have a Charter Review Commission meeting, and I'm on the Charter Review Commission also, it seems like part of the issue we've been having in terms of timeline, and Lucy, if you could correct me if I'm wrong on this, but part of the constraint we have is this requirement that 6 months after the federal population census is released, we have these things we need to do. Would you agree with that? I'm not asking you for a recommendation about how we could possibly fix that on the city charter, but would you agree that that is causing some constraint in this process?
Yes, as far as the timeline, the 6 months could be removed from the charter.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do this year is actually apply all of our charter requirements as well as complying with the new state law that requires the separate state approvals that were not required previously.
Okay, so do you feel like, as you know, some of the work we've been doing on the Charter Review Commission has been trying to get the city charter in line with state law and requirements. So do you think we need to take a look at getting the city charter's requirements?
Right, again, that would not affect the
obviously,
this year's redistricting.
Yeah, I just mean so 10 years from now or whenever we do this again, so that in case something is going on, that people are not met with the same
That's
issue.
certainly something that could be discussed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could make one comment to your question. This year is the first redistricting process where everything has come into play at one time. So in the 2014 legislative session, typically after a decennial census, the even-numbered election after that decennial census was delayed later in the summer. So if you think about the 2012 general primary and nonpartisan election, it was held July the 28th of 2012. And it was delayed, realizing that elections officials and commissions like this had work to do after the decennial census was received and the numbers were received, and it gave us adequate time to do those plans and make those changes that were necessary. But in 2014, there were some changes made to the legislation, and it removed the delay of the primary later in the summer in an even-numbered year after a decennial census. That's the first thing. The second thing is the primary is now moved earlier in the summer. So now we're looking at the May 24th, 2022 date for the primary, and that was done so that we could have 45 days before a primary and a runoff for the military voters. Again, this is the first time redistricting has taken place since that move of the primary date has taken place. Third, and certainly not least, is the delay of the census data because of COVID. So everything is coming together at one time to affect this process that may or may not happen 10 years from now. Again, based on what may happen with certain legislative changes. That's why elections officials over the state got together and asked the legislature to reconsider or consider moving the primary at least 1 month later to that June 28th date. But I don't know if that's going to gain traction or if it will even affect or impact the work of this commission.
Thank you, Ms. Bourne. Anyone else have any other questions? As I said, I want everyone to have a full opportunity to comment, question, etc. Good, sir.
One more thing to say about prison gerrymandering. Another reason why I'm commenting against so heavily against prison gerrymandering is because when prisoners are taken out of their communities and put into prisons or into incarceration, that technically also punishes the neighbors or residents of that community in terms of representation, because they were previously somebody's family member. They're still somebody's family member, and because they are removed from that community or removed from it for whatever reason, that reduces, and then they're incarcerated elsewhere, but then they are also counted as residents of that other area. That means that that community, that neighborhood, loses some type of representation in terms of sheer numbers. That's what I'd like to bring up regarding why prison gerrymandering is something that we should probably avoid and count those people as residents of the community as far as redistricting is concerned, even if the census will still count them as domiciles of their of their prisons or places of incarceration. Thank you so much.
Okay, it sounds like we have had a thorough discussion today. I appreciate everyone's time. Is there anything else, or do I have a motion to adjourn?
Byron Hickey make a motion to adjourn.
Dominic Perkins, second.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Thank you all very much. See you next week.